Are we ready?
There we
Yeah, I
go.
see we
John,
got
take it away.
all right. Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. I'm seeing numbers roll in. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Um, and yeah, Chris, should I just jump into
Do your little spiel.
us?
Give Chase the heads up of what you need, and we're going to see who. We're also during this time. We're going to see who's coming on here too.
Yeah, I'm always curious to see where people are dialing in from. So please use the chat and let us know. So anyway, I'll speak to, before we get started, a couple housekeeping items. So Chase, if you can move it to the next slide for me, please. All right, so all attendees are automatically muted. So if there's any background noise, don't worry about it. We're not going to hear it. Audio is available by computer and phone. So if you get disconnected, check out the email that we sent you. You'll see a dial-in number that you can use. We've got the Q&A function is open, but we're certainly going to use the chat feature to have any kind of dialogue and discussion. And if we can move to the next slide, I just want to say briefly a couple of words about where I'm from. I'm from Amelia, and we are a parks and recreation management platform. So what that means is we make things easier for you on the back end by helping you sell and manage your programs online, while at the same time making it easy for your residents to find and register for your programs and events. So if you like this type of content, Chase, you can move over to the next slide. Please check out amelia.com/library. We have a ton of content that's tailored specifically to you, like white papers, guides, and also past webinars. So please do go check it out. And lastly, we'll let you know that I will be sending you a recording of this webinar. So with that, Chris, I'll kick it over to you and I'll rejoin you at the end of the call.
Oh my Lord, John, it's another month and we got another great show for you, webinar. And I'm just scanning the whole webinar chat of who's on here, Chase. It is just an interesting a motley crew this week. First of all, we got Chris Clark, the legend from Kings, Georgia, King George, Virginia. I've known him for many years when he was over in Maryland. We're going international now.
Yep.
Maybe it's because Chase, you did your presentation up there in Canada last week, last 2 weeks ago, or whatever. And a dear colleague, Scott from Fraser Valley, known Scott for probably about 25 years. So it's always kind of, when I see the list, it's like a who's who, a coming home, old home type of thing when we get to see this. And it's great to see so many familiar faces. But I am very, very pleased to introduce Chase Ellis. If you've never met him, he's very, very interesting, very dynamic. Has worked in a number of different agencies across not only Parks and Recreation, but also the campus side of recreation, which gives a great different perspective and a different feel on how we approach our services. Met Chase a couple of years ago at Director School, and when I put a call from out, he was one of the people that I really wanted to target because I think he's got a really good message and also a different message than we traditionally hear. And I know we got Ray O from the Chicagoland area, who's actually a consultant now, and he does a lot of master plans and feasibility studies. So maybe we may be getting some. Maybe if Ray would throw some comments into the chat while we're talking, can help get the discussion going. So I'm going to turn it over to Chase. Take us away.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, with the individuals coming in on the chat, I'm slightly jealous of Colorado Springs right now. I do miss the snow. And I mean, Texas, it was 42 this morning, and I was like, great, I get to put on a long sleeve shirt. So
Well,
just
trust me,
glad it's
I was there. I was there yesterday, Chase, and everybody was very very excited because this was like one of the first big snows that they've had for the year.
Yeah, and it's super needed because the West has not gotten any snow for this last month. So, but super excited to be here. And really excited to have this opportunity to join Chris and John and really talk about, master plans and not just making a master plan to have a coffee table book. Because I think a lot of times in the past, that's not only how we as professionals had them was, we'd go through this process and then we check a box and it's done with. But then, how can we really leverage these things into engaging the community and the public in getting engaged with our departments and what we do to serve them. So super excited to jump in and talk about this. Like Chris had said, I've worked the past 2 decades, from county parks and rec to municipal city government to universities. Taught at Utah State, well, graduated from Utah State in parks and rec, and then at Indiana State for my master's. But one thing that I've loved is really just getting out in these different communities. I've joked that I've lived in 8 states. And so I've got to see a wide variety of organizations and how they've done them and what they've done well. And I've really tried to bring that stuff back to where I currently am in Trophy Club, and being able to really kind of take it to the next level because that's one thing that we as professionals are always trying to do is innovate and make things better for our community. And so that's a little bit about me. A couple of things that I love, definitely my family recreating, but then also my work family, talking about serving on the Capra Commission and being able to see what these standards are to make us, you know, be a part of the best and have that foundation to promote growth. So very happy to be a part of that and actually serve along Chris on the commission as well. So we're going to jump right into that. When we talk about master plans, sometimes they can be a thorn in our side. It's like, oh, we've got to update this. It's not a short process. Our current master plan, we're on the tail end of it right now in Trophy Club, and um, it's been a 12-month process, and we're a smaller organization. Sometimes these engagements and for larger organizations can be 18 months to 2 years. But there's a reason why we're investing so much time into telling our story. And so part of that, one thing that we did was rethinking the role of the master plan. Like, what do we want to come out of the back end of this and be able to use it to help facilitate our goals, our objectives? And so, when we're talking about these technical roadmaps, there's so much more than that. It's really a way for us to be able to tell our community's vision, our values, and what we want for the future. And one thing that we've been looking at is we just redid our 20-year strategic plan for the town of Trophy Club. And part of that pillar is promoting quality of life. And that's one thing that we've really thought about our master plan of how does that fit into that pillar and support the overall strategic plan for the town? Because that way, then you're not just garnering the support of the fans of Parks and Rec, but you're garnering the fans of town council and the other boards as well. Chris.
Chase, you just said something very, 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 very key about this whole dynamic, and I've really started to compartmentalize this note in my speeches and just in my thinking. Is too often we go get community engagement and community input from just the users. Okay.
Yeah.
It's how do the entire community vision this thing called Parks and Recreation? Because it's easy to go to the people who love us. Okay. And oh, yeah, anything you do is great. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But it's really when we got to look at it from a holistic standpoint, because guess what? We're going to need the entire community to figure out, more importantly, the funding mechanisms of this thing in the long term.
Yeah, and that's discussions that we're having right now with the park board is they're like, okay, we have these projects, but now how walk through the timeline of how we're going to fund those. And it's like, well, as an advisory board, yes, you're supporting this document, but there's a long road ahead of being able to, get it in our budgets, our CIP projects, and being able to have a timeline to accomplish this stuff. And that's really where the storytelling comes about of making it more than just a document, that it's truly a part of what we do and why we're doing it. And that kind of jumps into, the being a document to actual dialogue and how these master plans can help us in those conversations because the plan is great, right? And we're not the plan isn't just a checkbox. A lot of times when we start projects, we have in our minds point A to point B. But a lot of times in community government, we don't end up where our initial point B was. We might be at point B over here, but the important thing is they're at point A that we had an engine to get us moving. And that's really what these become is that engine to get us moving along that progress line and using this not as it's, this is a word, this is the document, but that this is our start to our guiding principle of our overall outcomes. And so looking at that data and everything that we gather from the community, how can we turn it into not only strategy, but inspiration and action? And so, like, as we're talking about like the new era of engagement, when we think back of all the different plans that you may have and the participants may have been a part of, we instantly go back to, okay, we've got surveys, we have town halls, we have all these different meetings. And that's really where I feel like sometimes it exhausts the professionals because they're like, we're going to have 12 months and all these other meetings stacked on that I've still got to do my regular job. And so it seems very overwhelming, but just like we are with this webinar today, there's so many advances in technology that if people are able to jump into that, it isn't going to be as taxing as it has in the past.
Yeah, and I really like what you're saying here. And I just did a session yesterday in Colorado, and it was on using the technology, and I actually referenced some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today
Yeah.
about how there's such a less of a lift now than there was in the quote unquote golden era when I was doing master plans, for agencies back 10, 15, 20 years ago. And what it also does is it gets more people access to giving you information as opposed to just those people who either love you or hate you. So you're getting a more robust data set. And that's a key
Yeah.
aspect here. We all know that in public information, public comment periods, et cetera, you're either a halo or a horns, okay? And that means you're either the best thing since sliced bread or you're the dumbest person in the world. But honestly, with my research background, that's really not good data. I need a
Yeah.
good data set. And so this technology really allows us, and it's simple technology. It actually doesn't really even cost you much. And Chase will actually touch upon that to get a larger set of data. And that will give you really kind of that insight onto where the people are going and where do they want their parks and recreation system to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chase, your mic just dropped out, at least for me.
Am I back?
Yep, 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 yep.
Yeah. And what I was going to hit on that was, not only having that data, but our communities are demanding transparency, authenticity, and involvement. And really being able to use that data that can be easily digestible and for them to be able to understand whether instead of looking at Excel sheets, being able to look at graphics that detail the data and give them a sense of involvement but then also keeping that transparency and authenticity alive. And one thing that we talk about is as you're providing them this information and not having it behind closed doors, that you're starting to build relationships with these individuals that become lifelong partners in the community. And, there's just so many benefits being able to share that data in a way that's easily digestible. I put, a couple of ideas up here because every community, you as professionals and are the ones that know your community the best and how to best tell your story. And so infographics are just a simple, easy way, especially with today's technology, that they don't want to have to click through pages. Like realistically, I know with our master plan, people are going to read the first 5 pages and then the remaining 160 pages they're not going to get to. So how can you put information that's what they want to see at the beginning? So as we talk about, strategic plans, they've really become visual storytelling and marketing tools to get the word out. And I really think with the pandemic, it reshaped perceptions of recreation and belonging and peacemaking. I would say more with the belonging and peacemaking because people flocked to our parks. That's where they wanted to be. That's where they wanted to see themselves. And so really being able to take an individual and when they're reading and analyzing what we're doing with our master plans, that they're then able to put themselves in that space and visualize what they would like to see or what is coming forward as far as projects with this. And I think a lot of times when we talk about data, it can be very human it takes
Dehumanization.
the human out of it. And so really this, humanizing the organization and trust and engagement by bringing them into those space really help a lot. Um, so when we talk about stories, organizations, we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. But what you do on the front end of the master plans, being able to then bring it into the back end and tell that story for the next 5, 10 years of these projects, these activities are tied back to the work that you did in previous years with the community, with the community.
Yeah, and I'm hearing a couple different things from you. Is we got to tell the story. We got to tell the story with data. And Chase, I just put in the chat of how many people are leveraging AI to help them
Yeah.
develop infographics because that's a simple, easy lift, doesn't cost you much. And Steve, remember Steve Lawson from Director School? He says we're just starting to use it. Some people are saying, "Hey, listen, never thought about that, but that's a great idea." Some people are just playing around with it. So it's something that's there. And again, infographics like what Chase has on it are very, very easy for the eye to pick up. Again, there's so much information for people to process. We got to put it down in that filter, okay? And then it's got to spit out that story that
Yeah.
Chase is alluding to.
And one of the big things with AI is that, for organizations like ourselves that doesn't have a large marketing department or, we don't have marketing within our Parks and Rec department. So being able to leverage some of those tools to spit out a quick infographic really helps because it saves you time. And then if you have to work cross departments and, getting those authorizations, things like that to get out to on social media. So AI, we've started using it a lot more just to help with like simple posts that make it more human that they can see themselves in. So one thing we hit on that about humanizing the vision. What is your overall vision that you're trying to accomplish with these master plans? I know I saw Darren on here from Brookings. I worked with Darren years ago, and we were able to do the Dakota Nature Park. And I remember when we were visioning that park and what it wanted to be, there was a lot of talks about, what activities what are going to be the uses, but not just the uses right now, but 5, 10 years down the road. And that really came into the overall planning of that facility and that park. And so when we talk about that emotion, emotion does drive action. If you're able to get the community engaged and involved, then they're emotionally engaged into it. And that emotion does drive action. So when we're talking about the shared stories, and I'll hit on this here in a minute, but a lot of times when you get like individuals together in a room with the master plans and the topics of the associations, different things like that. We had a joint meeting with our soccer and our baseball association. They in their minds were very different about what they wanted to see from this, But once we got them in the room talking and sharing this shared vision of what we wanted to accomplish, it was amazing the commonalities that they started seeing in themselves of wanting to make our parks and our systems better and how we can now collectively work together to make that happen. And that gives way to, the why. Why are we doing this? And then it gives the way to how are we going to do that? What's the what that comes out of it? So as we talk about that, one thing that we did, Trophy Club, the last master plan, and I say master plan loosely, was in 2008. And it was really just a very static inventory of what our park assets were. There is no direction of what we wanted to accomplish. And so realistically, these activities that we've done over the past 12 months is creating the community's first input into the what they want to see for the next 10 years. But one thing that we had was a current project of our pool renovation that was going on. In my mind, it would have been great to have that wait till we did the master plan, but we knew we needed to do a micro engagement to get this project rolling. And so, one thing that when we are talking about the community voice, we went out and we met with them as they were at the pool. We had meetings with the swim team when they were there in early morning. And then we went out at noon and had a pop-up engagement with the families that were there. And then in the evening, we had a meeting with the water aerobics because we knew that if we didn't go to them at those times, we wouldn't be able to get this feedback. And then all of a sudden, we're able to produce a graphic that shows all the touch points and all the information that was gathered and be able to show that these are the common things that people want to see there. Chris.
And that issue. So for some of you guys don't know, but I've got an academic background. I've got a PhD, so I go back to the research. And you said something very, very important is we are actually collecting data points at multiple times during the day. Okay. I would actually go and double down another level is multiple times during the traditional swim season, because not only are your users might be different at 6 in the morning versus 9 in the morning versus 11 to 5, 7 o'clock at night, but you may get different users between the early season, the
Yep.
mid-season, and the postseason to get that fuller picture of what does the community truly want. I used to joke when I used to talk more about master plans that if we only interviewed people who came to our rec center at 6:30 in the morning, all we would do is have senior programs.
Yep.
I mean, it makes simple, but how do we develop a strategy on what Chase is saying of meet people where they're at, getting the data, but also be cognizant of times, seasons, dates, weekends versus weekdays, spring versus summer versus fall. I mean, because some people will never go into our rec centers in the middle of the summer because it's just crawling with camp kids. They're not going to be there. Those are the things that we need to think about as well as we're trying to collect that data.
Yeah, and I think that goes along, meeting people where they are, finding ways to engage them that doesn't make it an inconvenience to speak with you. So like a lot of our engagements that we did at our special events. They were already there, their kids were engaged with activities, and we didn't ask 50 questions on a survey. We had 3 or 4 questions that was very easy for them to be like, no, this is what activities we participate in. These are things that we like. These are things we'd like to see. And one thing that Chris and I've really talked about is the socio demographics. Our master plans, we always have the demographics of our community makeup. But what is the social side of those that is the magical mix of who lives here, what do they like, and how do they help decide whether we need more pickleball courts, more playgrounds, more dog parks, senior programs. That's one thing that we're working on right now is we have a very active group of active adults as we're creating a space for them. That one of their questions is, as I've taken the statistically valid survey and the community survey, we didn't see questions that specifically called out senior programming. And I said, well, yeah. We don't. We have higher level questions that you as active adults can answer based on your likes. But then myself with teenagers at home, we're in a different time of life. I'm still able to answer that same question and give my point of view without having, questions that we just put NA because they're not applicable. And so really finding a way to have questions that engage everybody and doesn't exclude people. And when we talk about, transforming the input into shared ownership, people need to see that information they gave you, they need to see it somewhere in the plan because that creates their buy-in that they did have a voice in this. Their group was able to see, their influence. And once they see that, then they become advocates and storytellers for the project. And so that's very important to be able to not just have the information and say that you collected it, but actually show them that you're utilizing that as well.
Yeah, Chase, let me kind of double down on that effort. One of the challenges with survey collection, master plan collection is kind of somewhat of a challenge of a general mistrust of government, and that's coming down from the federal level down to the state level down to the city levels that we have. Is we've got to do a better job of collecting the data and then tying decisions back to the data. So it says, yes, we've collected this data and this is how we're using it. And oh, by the way, as a result of the data, this is what's now being proposed and created because people will get tired if they don't see that there. And you know what? We also have to tell the public that just because you check the barks and you're one person versus the 1,000 people want this versus you want one thing, you're not going to get it. But at least we can tie these things together of the reason why are we doing what is being recommended to city council for funding or for adoption in this master plan.
Yeah, and I think it really, ties in also the community being able to realize that you're not brushing them off,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they can see where that information is filtered down to. And so it may not be necessarily the outcome they want, but they're able to see that everybody was able to put a voice into it.
In a couple of our things we've done is, where we have, here are the 25 different ideas that the community had, and we kind of pull those things together. And then that person can see, hey, listen, here's number one, number two, okay? And oh, by the way, my idea, and that those had 5,000 ideas and comments versus my idea only had 12.
Yeah.
That at least now we're putting it in perspective and we're showing people. And I think it little leads into your first comment here of that's a visual for people to get of how decisions are now starting to make their way through the process.
Yeah, and everybody is a different um connoisseur of information. Some can hear it and visualize it inside, but myself, like I need to have a visual aspect of, what that could look like. And I have an example, actually was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, for their CAPRA reaccreditation this last summer. And being able to get to know the team there and see some of the major projects that they have coming up and what they're doing with some of their downtown area. This first little computer box is their Falls Park, and it brings in some powerful information, but it also gives people a visual of what type of activities they'll be able to hold there, and it creates that spark of imagination and excitement for what's to come. One of the other things was my last city I was in was the city of DeSoto, and they just got approved a $54 million rec center that will be opening up here uh, 1st of January. But one of the things that when we talked about animation, because $54 million isn't a cheap project, and this was years ago that the animations were there was one skin tone, one hairstyle, there was barely male and female on there. But as a minority majority community, our big push with our designers were our community needs to see themselves in there as a multi-generational activity area. They need to see the young, the old. They need to see different skin tones, different individuals partaking in the activities in there. And I was very happy that, with that little push, don't be afraid to push your architects and your designers to let them know what the makeup of your community is so that they can help you tell that story. Because if people are able to see themselves in their plans, in their facilities, they're going to be able to vote for that. Um, and I just thought it was a great representation of, how far 3D renderings and fly-throughs have come over the past years. And these are things that we can, be able to use the architects and stuff to push them to deliver for us.
Yeah, what I hear you're saying is we have to get our lenses off, okay,
Yep.
of how we see quote unquote the world, and then we also have to then look at the lenses of our major demographic groups, our major socio demographic. I like to use the
Yep.
term psychographic groups are going to perceive this information, and that's where that representation comes in that aerial or that video from DeSoto.
Yeah, definitely. And so like as you inspire through those designs, like that's kind of like how you make these projects happen after you complete this. But how do you get that data to dialogue? And one thing that I was talking about, I was recently up in Canada and was speaking to Parks and Rec professionals in Ontario. And Welland in Ontario has done a great job. And I wanted to share just some information of how they're engaging their citizens as they're moving through their master plan. Because one thing that they're doing is not only translating numbers into narratives, and these are things we've incorporated as well, but explaining why the data and reveals what the community needs are, and then what the equity gaps are, and what are the opportunities for our connections. But then also it helps them visualize, for accessibility. It's clear where they need to be, when they need to be, where those engagements are, whether they're virtual, whether they're in person. But it creates visual tools to help, the complex thing that we do of making these projects a lot easier and easier to digest and relatable. So jumping in here, and I've seen a lot more municipalities use Engage, which is a program that you can go in and you tailor it towards your city. And this is one thing that if we weren't as far down the process that I would have loved to, incorporate into the town. But first of all, the thing that stands out to me is they put who's listening. When you put a question or a comment in here, you're able to associate a face with who's responding to your question. But then as you come down and you see, they're very clear about the information that they've got from their engagements, from their surveys. You have that information, the top desired amenities. I'm not now having to go through 60 pages of document to see what the top desired amenities are. They're right here, and we can see those percentages. But also what I love is they have a one stop for their links. If you're tired at night and you just want to dive deeper into what's been done in the past, they're able to show that information as well as these key dates of, you know, obviously this was back in April as they were doing this, but what are those key dates for engagement? But then as you come down, they keep information of where they are in the
Mhm.
process. And the life cycle, I think, is very important because everybody thinks, in government, everything goes so slow. And they don't realize the amount of work that we're doing in the back end to make this project stay on track. And so I think really being able to have a life cycle, whether on your web page, whether it's on a page like this to show where you're at in the process is very helpful.
I love that aspect because you said it so right. There are so many things that it takes. We have projects, and I would actually do this not only for the master plan, but actually for maybe some of our major projects,
Yeah.
because they say, "Oh, we're going to be doing this park improvement," and then they expect the next day that trucks, or we get funded, for this park in our budget. And they expect trucks, literally, the budget goes down on September 1. They expect trucks to be moving in September 2. I'm like, no, we
Oh,
got to design it. Design's going to take a year. Hell, for us, we had to get a years worth long of permitting because in one of our parks, it's above a pipeline, and that took a year to do it. But if we can put some of these things, or hey, listen, this is what we're waiting on, is a permit from ConocoPhillips or whatever. At least there's something that we can point to. It's not just Chase is being lazy or Chris is being lazy. It's no, this is an active, project for us. It takes time.
yeah. And I think, having them understand that time where it is, but then also not making it complicated that yes, you have that individual that you can email, but on this one page, I don't want to go to my email, open up, type in their address. They can just ask a question here and it gets delivered to that individual. So there's so many different types of tools, and these aren't you don't have to go get a new website. These are some things that you can implement on your web page. I'll show here in a minute what we've done just as far as kind of timetables of projects and stuff because we're not a very large organization and don't have millions that we can spend on software to be able to do that. So, but um, one thing that I want to talk about is we use this data as conversation starter. A lot of the things that we're going through right now is, okay, we have these projects. Is this what it's going to look like? And I explained to everyone, master plan is 30,000 foot view. We still got to get further down to those specifics, and and we'll be doing more of these engagements to get to those specifics. But this is that 30,000 foot view.
So remember, and that's a great pickup there, Chase, is you have your citywide comprehensive plan, okay, and that's the 50,000 foot level. Then you have your Parks and Recreation master plan, that's your 30,000 foot level. Then theoretically, you have your strategic plan that says, hey, listen, over the course of the next 3 years, we're going to concentrate on this park, okay, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, which is in the master plan, which is reference that we need to provide, overall positive Parks and Recreation in the comprehensive plan. And then you start working on the funding mechanisms. And so everything is connected, is what Chase is saying. So you can point back to the why you are doing this project as opposed to other projects.
Yeah, and I think going along with that, Chris, it's very important to realize that, councils are going to change.
You're fading out, Chase.
The one thing that I did want to point out with that is that councils are going to change, and having these plans
Yes.
in a foundation help keep you moving forward. That you don't have a rogue council member come in and just derail, all that you've been working on because you have the data and the community support. That's going to keep them on that line. Yes, there will be things that they'll want to help motivate and do with that project, but it's not going to derail what you've already been doing.
I 100% agree with you, but I have to take another take on this. Okay, this might be the hot take of the thing,
I love it.
of our discussion. Is we ran the game plan, right? We did the master plan. We started doing things. We got in 2022, we got about $30 million to do a bunch of park improvements. We're actually taking like that final piece to the
Yeah.
board tomorrow night. And the new board comes in 4 out of 7 board members, and they kept referring it to as their plan, not our plan. Their plan, not our plan. We actually, this is kind of the story here, guys. We actually started ripping off anything that said Parks and Recreation Master Plan
Yeah.
and just said this is another plan because they were overly sensitive on it was their plan, not excuse me, the previous board's plan, not their plan. So I agree with 100% what you're saying. Is I just a real life situation that I'm living in right now.
Well, and I think along with that, we a lot of times we're that engine that is getting us to that destination, and we don't always get that recognition. But to your point, Chris, being able to pull that off and be like, yeah, you guys adopt this plan, but it's still that plan that we had going forward. So yes, we're appeasing you by calling it your plan, but we as professionals know deep down that it's what we've been working on, and our goal is to, make it come about for the community. So whether they want it, their plan, my plan, I don't care whose plan it is,
Very
as
true.
long as we keep going forward for the community. So, one of the things that we had talked about earlier was all these tools that we have are great. If you have staff that can do marketing and do infographics, that's fantastic. A lot of agencies don't have that budget. And one thing that we were looking at was how can we engage the community in a way that, historically, town halls have not worked for our town, because we are a bedroom community. A lot of 30 to 45-year-olds, they get home, they have their kids to get to bed. The last thing they want to do is come to town hall from 7 to 9 p.m. and put, stickers on boards and show what they want to see. They're tired, they're exhausted. And so we really thought, what are ways that we could engage those individuals as well as others, to be able to get their input? And one thing that we did was, looking at our digital platforms, how can we expand that reach, and making it visible and interactive? We had created two different opportunities for engagement. One of them was this meeting in a box that organizations could do as many meetings as they wanted. Our active adults, I think, did six total meeting in a box. But what they're able to do is, as they're meeting during the day as their activity group, they were able to come in, and I'm going to just show everybody real quick, what this looks like. We could do active adults. And as we talk about, it gives the time, the date, the meeting location, activity center, and then there was 24 that were there. So we have all of our data and information there. And then it popped up, what categories do they want to discuss? So this is where it kind of separated them. We specifically just want to talk about active adult programming. And so then we had questions that were tailored, that as they were drinking their tea and their coffee and, in between their games of mahjong, they're able to fill this out. What do they want to see offered? What should be remain there, and why? And this was just a great opportunity for them to self guide themselves through this, but then we get that information from a larger group of individuals than we typically would have at, just a town hall that we have 7 people show up to.
Yeah, and that's what's going on in the chat right now, Chase, is Emmy Richards from Ashland, Virginia. She's using something similar to this. Ray, who's a consultant, former executive director in the Chicagoland area, was talking about my comment of saying, it's the community's plan, not the board's plan. And that's a great pickup that I should have used in there about us versus them. It's the community's plan. That's a very, very good thing. And Kevin Cowling down in South Carolina mentioned that town halls are just not working for him. So
Yeah.
I get to that next generation of engagement, which is really the purpose of Chase's presentation today.
Yeah, and the thing that we talked about was also with these engagements, when we do those town halls, you're spending a lot for the consultants to fly in
Yes.
and spend the night there, and then to have 5 people show up. We're actually doing these virtual engagements saved us money because we weren't flying the consultants out to run these town halls for us, that they were doing it on themselves. And so with that, the other aspect was we're kind of unique because we've got an 855-acre nature park. That we have a lot of activities there, and we needed to create a master plan just for that as far as activities. And so what we did was we created this virtual engagement room that it works just like you do at a town hall. You have the boards up and you go from station to station. Um, just because of time, I'll show a couple of the things, but like, question, how do you enter the park? How is our community entering Trophy Club Park? And they can drop a pin down and say, I do it off Trophy Club Drive. It shows where they're at, and they can drop as many pins, and then they can put the information of, do I like the parking structures? Do I like any of the assets that are there? What do I need to see improved in those areas? And so it was just a great tool for the community to be able to be at nighttime. A lot of these parents, when they put their kids to bed, they pulled out their iPad and they were filling this out. And it wasn't just a static room. It walked them through the process. So they felt like, they do in the town hall, they're putting their information in the categories. But then for our partners are then able to take that data and be able to decipher it in a way that's digestible.
Have you ever thought about doing kind of online town hall meetings where there is somebody behind the wall there that can answer questions in real time?
I've seen a couple of organizations that have done that and done it successfully. I personally haven't, just
Yeah,
because you almost need like a technical individual behind to run the
yeah.
chat and everything there. But I think it's the important thing is no matter your department size, whatever way that you're able to scale these engagements in a way that are new, that pull people in. There's a reason why Apple does their big reveal every year because they make that fun and engaging, and then people are wanting to go buy the new iPhone because they saw the new features, they saw what that was. And so there is value, to having live engagements that way as well. But I think communities just need to realize, what's best for theirs. Oh, okay, next one. Uh, the one thing that we wanted to talk about is just that transparency. And one thing that we've done is we don't have a big budget for software. And so we've just created a web page on ours that talk about our current projects. And it ties back to the master plan that, we've created that timeline, but also importantly, creating that transparency that we're not each month we update with the budget so they can
Oh,
see what the total amount allotted for it is, what our expenditure to date has been, the timeline, the documents associated with it. We put the contracts out there. But then also photos, which, we do weekly photos of these projects. Obviously, it's open and completed now. And we'll leave it on for the next year just so that people can see this was a project that was identified through our planning, and this is how we got to that space.
it also helps with your accountability too.
It does. It does. And I think, that accountability, that transparency, it builds that trust with the community. And there's been varying trust issues with my current department over the years. And so that's one thing that I've really thought about is how can I relink that trust so that they become advocates for us versus critics. And so again, last month was talking about culture and building that culture in your team. But also like on the bigger aspect, how are we building a culture of storytelling with our community and building that culture of involvement and accountability and trust? I think is a huge part of that. So, kind of key takeaways because we're kind of in the last 10 minutes is, master plans, they're just the beginning. This is what I'm telling our community right now that just once we get it approved and adopted by council, that's where the work really starts. Because now we've got to look at how do we fund this? How do we, keep it going in a way that in 5 years, when we do a reevaluation of whether we're right on the same right track or not, that the community will want to provide feedback and input about the success that we've had in the previous 5 years. And so keeping that moving and that going, and that's what I tell in my presentations that I'm like, we're just getting started. Like that snowball has just started at the top of the hill, and this is going to be a big movement going forward, and this is going to help generate that power. But then also inspiring and engaging and influence people through the story and strategy, being real about where we are, what we can do, what we can't do, but at least give them direction of where we're going. And then also, just putting out there, the reason why I showed different examples is there's no one right way. The right way is what's fitting for your community. And we have a lot of, friends that, I can call Chris and be like, hey, what works in Woodlands? And some of those aspects I can bring to Trophy Club, but also there's other aspects that I've got to look at and be like, well, this is something really important to my community. So how can I take that idea and shift it to adapt to the community that I'm working in?
Chase, one of the things that we have not talked here, you just spoke on it just a second ago, is, we're going to do a master plan. We haven't talked about funding, okay, of these projects and that type of stuff. And too often, I see master plans that says, oh, go write a grant, oh, go, do this to try to get additional funding. Sometimes they'll put some bond numbers together and
Yeah.
that type of stuff. But I want to kind of connect the dots here. Your approach really tries to get as broad base
Mhm.
of constituents involved in the planning process. Tries to not have any excuses as to why you were not able to make comments in that. And instead of just surveying the 6 to 8% of the people who use our programs and services, you're casting a wider net. And so when that time comes, that big numbers start falling, 5 million, 10 million. Now we're into potentially bonding aspects. You're going to need to be able to stand behind something that has robust levels of community involvement, engagement, and data to be able to really have a good feel on are these projects actually going to be fundable. You can only do that with that robust engagement process that you've described right through here.
Yeah, and one thing that you just reminded me of, we did not only a community survey, but a statistically valid survey.
Awesome.
And we put those right next to each other. And this could be good and bad, but for us it worked out because we were in within a 5 to 8% variance of what the community survey of anyone. We didn't know if they were community members or outside that took that, and then what our community members said that they supported each other. And
Well, and
so,
what you did there was just you made your numbers even stronger now because
correct.
it wasn't just this survey that anybody could have filled out. It was we had a survey, we had a scientifically valid survey, we had some symmetry between
Yeah.
those surveys, and so it's check, check, check that you're doing what you're saying you're doing.
Yeah, and
You're hearing over and over and over the same things. I like to use the word triangulation, is we're
yeah.
triangulating down to exactly what the community wants theoretically at this point in 2025.
Correct. And I see Darren's comment in there about using Engage with Engage Brookings. And a lot of times like these tools can also they're very effective, to let us know of issues or things within our community, but also spinning it in a way that having people be able to use it in a way that it's not just, oh, when I have a problem, this is how I engage with the town or the city. And I think really being able to change that narrative that this is a communication tool that, report on the good things, report on, and I think it really depends on how the city wants to use that tool to get the information out. because it is a valuable tool, whether it's, just reporting issues or like Welland has done to really facilitate their overall plan for growth.
Absolutely.
So with that, I guess, the big thing when we talk about these master plans is each community is different. And so if there's any questions about, things we want to hit on just, right before.
Yeah, throw them in the chat, and we'll bring we'll bring John back online here to kind of wrap it up. But if we've got some questions from the group, that would be really awesome. You got Chase's email address. Chase, what the heck is that QR code? Yeah, I'm an old guy here. What's that? What's that strange thing?
They scan the QR code, it just goes to my LinkedIn.
Awesome.
But shoot me a message.
Listen, Chase is a
Also,
master marketer. Look at this. He's trying to build his brand here. Good job.
no, my thing isn't about building a brand, it's about building a family. And so for me, it's, I want to connect with everyone I can across the country because I don't know everything. And I tell my staff all that time. I'm like, I don't know everything, but what I am good at is building connection and being able to find people that know those right answers. I saw Molly's on here. There's times that I've texted Molly and it was like, hey, how do you guys go about this? And so it's really about building those connections. And so, oh, and I do need to give a shout out because Emmy's on here. Today's her birthday, so happy birthday, Emmy.
Emmy is the director of a one-person department in Ashland, Virginia, and for all small departments, she is trying to push forward a small community engagement through NRPA or on her own, whatever. And it is a very good idea. I love what Emmy's doing because my career started as a one-person department in Northern Maine.
Yep. And I agree, whether it's a one-person department or a 400-person department, we're all trying to accomplish the same thing with the communities that we're serving.
Hey, John, you got anything for us?
Yeah, we'll just wrap it up. We're at the end of the hour. I just want to thank both of you for presenting and everyone who joined the call today. I really liked the ideas that were shared. In particular, the 3D rendering, that's definitely come a long way, and it really shows what you're trying to achieve. And also in Welland, Ontario, I thought that was a pretty powerful tool, the way that they're using it. It seems like a really great way to engage your community and bring them along on the journey with you. So fantastic ideas from Welland.
And Robert asked if the slides are going to be available today. Typically, they're available in a day or two on the Amelia website.
Yeah, you got it. We'll be sending out that recording. We got someone from Hamilton, the Hammer. Welcome. We'll be sending you that recording too, Kevin. But thanks everyone for joining, and I hope to see you all at the next one.
All right, guys, we'll see you January, actually. We'll see you then.
Bye.